It's time for another installment of the basics, and on today's show I want to take you back to the Star Trek card game once again and explain the different affiliations that are in the game. Now, choosing an affiliation is what gets you started because you can't build a deck until you know who you want to play as. And as I'm about to show you, there are many choices that will influence how you play the game and how you build your decks. So let's get right into the affiliations right now and I'll show you what you got. When the Star Trek card game first came out in 1994, there were only 4 main affiliations that you could play as or start building a deck with. You had Federation, Klingon, Romulan, and non-aligned. Now, the Federation was the best affiliation to play as right off the bat. They had the better people with the better attributes, perfect for completing missions and dilemmas that were seated under those missions. So it was an easy choice to start playing as Federation. If you wanted to build a deck where you did more battling and worried less about completing missions as fast as everybody else, even though you are playing for those 100 points, you would take either the Klingons or the Romulans. They also had the ability to cloak their ships on the space line, so you'd flip the card over so it looks like that, and you could not be detected, you could not be battled while you were cloaked. The non-aligned cards, which started off in the Premier set and ended up going all throughout the run of the 1E game, you could use them in concert with the other affiliations. So you could build a dual affiliation deck and use the non-aligned and some of their assorted skills to round out a deck. Say if you didn't have enough cards, all of one affiliation or personnel that you needed for that deck. When First Contact came out as an expansion after the movie, it introduced the Borg, and this has been one of my favorite affiliations throughout the game because you could do so much with the Borg and you don't necessarily have to focus your deck on collecting points. You could just destroy everybody on the space line. So it was a big advantage for that. When the Deep Space Nine standalone / expansion came out, it introduced over the course of the core set and a few more expansions, more affiliations. So now you could play as Cardassians, Bajorans, the Dominion, which makes a very, very good deck, a good playable deck, lots of unique cards, and the Ferengi, which have some interesting skills with some of their personnel, but as a standalone deck it's kind of hard because they lack a lot of attributes that other affiliations would have. Unfortunately, the Bajorans, I don't care what anyone says, and I'm going to probably get some kickback on this, it's a weak deck no matter what you do, because their personnel, aside from a few key personnel that have decent attributes, they're crap. Their ships are weak. I'm not getting into that because this episode isn't about ships, but it's a weak overall deck. It's hard to make it work. The Cardassians, you could build a very good deck with the Cardassians. You do run into problems though, which I will explain on a later show. So if you're going to start from the affiliations from Deep Space Nine, the Dominion is always your best bet. Be warned though that most of the Dominion cards are stuck in the using the Gamma Quadrant space line, so you'll have to have wormholes and you'll be completing a lot of missions in a different quadrant, which adds more dynamics to the game. When the Voyager expansion came out a while later, we got 3 new and final affiliations to the game. We've got the Kazon, which are your pretty much Delta Quadrant Klingons, albeit a bit more screwed up and pissed off and less honorable, if any. The Hirogen, which makes a very interesting Delta Quadrant deck. You can actually accomplish quite a lot with the Hirogen. I did put together a Hirogen deck and play it once. I didn't win the game, but I think I was only 10 points away from winning when my opponent pulled a rabbit out of his hat. But it's a very good deck to have. As long as you have enough Hirogen personnel, you can make that deck work. And finally, the Vidians. And while some of their personnel, like this guy, have some decent attributes, they're not very good for deck making. If you do build a Vidian deck, please put some non-aligned personnel in there. Otherwise, you're just going to be antagonizing people the whole game and not accomplishing much else. Especially if someone's using a Delta Quadrant Federation deck and has Voyager and the associated crew in their deck, you're pretty much screwed. Those are the main affiliations of this game. And with that being said, You have to take the time to research closely the affiliation you're going to use before you start building a deck. The moment you pick your affiliation will determine the type of cards that round out the rest of your deck, from power cards to dilemmas. Your side decks, for example, which I'm going to get into again on another episode, but the choice of the affiliation is the most important thing. And because of the different and varied affiliations, your deck could take place in one of 3 quadrants of space, so that will influence how the game is played between you and your opponent as well. So choose carefully your affiliation, because that will set the tone for the game you're going to play. Have a great day, everybody.